After watching this video, you will have a clear mental model about AWS Lambda. Previously, I made a video on the introduction to AWS Cloud or cloud computing in general. If you didn't see that video, I would highly recommend you first go through that. So in that video, we had a simple web application to add two numbers. And this was the simple function to do that. Now, to run this function on our server, we need to have multiple layers. Obviously, inside the app, we are running the function. Our app is running on the runtime. Runtime is running on top of the operating system, and the operating system is on top of the hardware. Now, let's see, just to run our simple function, what are the things we have to go through? First, we have to buy these expensive hardwares. Now, as a developer, we might not have the proper skill to configure these hardwares and network devices. So we'll have to hire some people to configure and maintain this. Similar story for these three layers as well. Let's say we are using free and open source software. So we don't have any cost, but then also we have to configure and maintain this. Now, as a developer, we just want to write our core application logic. We don't want to manage all the other things. These are just overhead for us. We don't want to write firewall configuration. We don't want to apply patch updates. We don't want to configure low-level routing. So to solve these problems, around 2006, a company called Jimkey first introduced the concept of give us your code, we will run it for you. But that was not commercially successful. In 2008, Google introduced Google App Engine, but it did not support arbitrary code. So you had to write a code in a custom Python framework. In 2010, a company called PyCloud first introduced functions as a service, right? Where you could write your function in Python, in simple Python, no framework. And finally, at the end of 2014, AWS released the AWS Lambda, and it has support for multiple programming language. AWS Lambda is built on top of an event-driven architecture. So based on a particular event, it will spin up an environment. So all those lower level layers that we are discussing, and then it will run your code. There can be many types of events. Someone is uploading a file into S3 bucket. That's an event which can invoke a Lambda function. There's a request at the API gateway. That can also invoke a Lambda function. And there are thousands of events that can occur inside AWS. Now let's understand how AWS Lambda is actually running your function code. So you have configured this function for a particular event. Once that event occurs, Lambda will first spin up the environment. So for understanding purpose, if you are familiar with EC2, let's say Lambda will spin up an EC2 instance. Okay, it will load your code on that instance, and finally it will execute your code. So once your Lambda function execution is done, it will destroy the instance. Now for a second, let's focus on this timeline. So let's say to complete the whole process, Lambda took 1000 milliseconds. Now in that 1000 milliseconds, 700 milliseconds is just to spin up and prepare the environment. And the actual function execution is taking 300 milliseconds. So this 700 millisecond is called the cold start. So this is a drawback of this model. So there are ways to overcome this nowadays. We'll discuss those in upcoming videos. Now let's quickly discuss some of the key specification about Lambda function. So this is the RAM range you can choose from, but you cannot choose the CPU size. If you increase the RAM size, it will increase the CPU power accordingly. You can attach an ephemeral or temporary storage up to 10 gigabyte with the instance. Ephemeral means the storage is temporary. Once the execution is done, everything will be deleted. The maximum execution time can be 900 seconds, not milliseconds, 900 seconds. And you will only pay for your execution time and the RAM you have chosen. So this is the basic concept of AWS Lambda. Now let me show you how you create a simple Lambda function. So for this example, I will use a special kind of event that is invoking a function URL. So basically inside Lambda, you can generate a function URL, and invoking that URL will run your Lambda function. Okay, so if you want to follow along, you need an AWS account, and if you don't have one, you can watch this playlist to create and set up an AWS account from scratch. All right, so I'm at my AWS console. Let me search for Lambda here and hit create a function. Let me call it test. And for the runtime, I'm choosing Node.js. Architecture 86 is fine. In the advanced settings, I need to turn on this function URL. And authentication type, I'm not blocking the function for anyone, so none is fine. All right, hit create function. This might take a couple of seconds. So yeah, the function has been created. Now in the console editor, you can see the code of this function. So we are just returning a response, and in the response, we are having a body, and in the body, we are just saying hello from Lambda. So let's call it hello from my first Lambda. Hit deploy, and let me copy the function URL and let me head over to my Postman. So let's create a request, paste the function URL, and I'm sending a GET request, right? And you can see I'm getting hello from my first. Okay, did I save first Lambda? Let's deploy it again. Yeah, first Lambda. All right, now if I send post request, then also I will be getting the same thing. All right, now instead of just sending a normal string, let us actually send whatever event that is coming to this function, right? So this is the event and I'm just returning the event back as a response. So hit deploy, and this time let us first send a GET request. So this is the object that is passed to Lambda, right? So you can see these are the headers, the raw path. So by the way, if I send any path here, let's say path, so that will come under here, headers, and the methods and everything will be present here. If I send a put request or post request, then also you can see all the things are coming along. All right, so in this fashion we can actually quickly create a Lambda function and invoke it by this function URL. All right, so this was all about AWS Lambda. If you are a developer and want to learn how to use AWS Lambda in a production environment with other services like AWS API Gateway, DynamoDB, CDK, and many more, you can check out this course. I will put the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any further questions, please let me know. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.